that gives me a lot of confidence. So the fact that I'm continuing to evolve and develop as a teacher is my greatest source of confidence.
So let's talk about the evolution of consciousness.
Sure.
I came to a talk you gave, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago at your centre in Islington.
Yeah.
It was interesting. So tell me how you see consciousness evolving.
Well, in order to put this in the perspective of enlightenment, it'll take a minute or two to create context.
We have some time, that's fine.
Okay, very good. So, you know, the Buddhists talk about a void or this great emptiness. And what we want to relate the whole notion of this great emptiness with or to is the timeless, formless domain from which the entire manifest universe emerged with the Big Bang. So the way to understand this is that before the Big Bang, we've got to go back to 13.7 or 14 billion years before the first cause, before time began. There was no thingness, right? There was no time, there was no space, there was no universe. But that was the realm of the unmanifest. But the entire universe, all time and all space, the evolutionary process, all emerged from this 0 point, from this no thingness. So the traditional teachings of enlightenment was what my teacher was teaching. This is what Buddhism teaches, this is what Vedanta teaches. That the traditional enlightenment is the discovery of the deepest part of ourself at the level of consciousness that has never been born and never entered the stream of time. So that means when we enter into a very deep state of meditation, so deep that awareness of the world disappears, awareness of time disappears, awareness of the mind disappears, awareness of our own form disappears. The great discovery is that everything disappears except we're still there. When there's no time and there's no world and there's no mind and there's no body, we're still there.
On one level, we're still there. We might not feel anything.
No. We're still there. But our sense of self has expanded to infinity, way beyond the confines of the psychological self. But that self that's still there, in that itself, there's no time. And so the traditional teachings of enlightenment, most teachers of enlightenment today are really pointing to this timeless, formless domain that we can access if we go into very deep states of meditation, or if you're in the presence of a powerfully enlightened person, you can have access to a dimension of your own consciousness in which there's no thought and there's no time. So when there's no thought and there's no time, to differing degrees, awareness of the world disappears. But what we're experiencing then is that timeless, formless domain from whence all of creation emerged.
Okay.
Okay, so the traditional enlightenment is the awakening to that domain, because when we awaken to that domain, we discover the deepest part of ourself that has never been born and never entered the stream of time. It's the discovery of our own immortal nature. And whenever we discover our own immortal nature, we discover an infinite source of confidence and security and comfort, because we realize that everything is always okay, because the deepest part of ourself has never been born and never entered the stream of time. But that's only half the picture, though.
That's the never-changing.
It's never-changing.
And there's also the ever-changing, which is the side.
Well, no, what we're talking about now is the never-changing.
Yeah.
But in terms of the evolution of enlightenment, we have to say, well, but out of this infinite, empty, timeless ground of all being, the entire creative process emerged with one big explosion.
Okay.
And if we want to put this in theological terms, if we choose to put it in theological terms, we could say that if we say that the unmanifest God, the uncreated God, the God who was abiding in this meditative state of peace and equanimity, chose. I'm putting in a theological context the Big Bang. So we could say then that the God at rest became the creator God. He or she chose to manifest him or herself in and through form.
Okay.
It's one way to look at the Big Bang. It's not the only way to look at it. but we can say that the energy and intelligence that initiated the creative process and it's driving the creative process came from emptiness. Emptiness and no-thingness was the source of the creative process and is always the source of the creative process. So the creative process emerged from no-thingness. But when it emerged, when the entire creative process emerged from zero or no-thingness, right, there was a change of shape and change of form, because now we've gone from no time and no space and no change to just from being to becoming, right? So there's a shift from absolute being, which is the experience of which is perfect, to the urge, the desire to exist in form, right? The desire to exist, and that's what the creative impulse is. And so, so the new enlightenment that I'm speaking about is really about awakening to the dimension of the absolute, the dimension of God or the absolute, which is the energy and intelligence that initiated the creative process and is driving the creative process, which is the impulse to become, the desire to exist in form, which we experience as an evolutionary impulse. And the experience the experience human beings have of this evolutionary impulse, we experience it. The easiest place to locate it is the sexual impulse. The sexual impulse is when we experience the Big Bang operating in our own biology. It's a biological command to procreate, right? And that the experience of the evolutionary impulse is a sexual impulse. The experience of it is ecstasy and urgency. What's the experience of God as the creative impulse? Ecstasy and urgency. Human beings are the only life forms that are driven to innovate and create that which is new. So the drive to innovate and give rise to that which is new comes from the evolutionary impulse. And human beings are driven to give rise to that which is new. And if you ever meet very, very creative people, those most gifted human beings, the architects of civilization, whether they be politicians, engineers, artists, spiritual luminaries, or individuals who are driven by an evolutionary impulse or by a creative impulse, they are driven, or there's almost like an evolutionary compulsion to give rise to that which is new. Sometimes if they're a great scientist who's on the verge of a breakthrough, won't sleep for days on end. And if you say, don't you think you should get some rest? They say, you don't understand how important this is. So there's some ecstatic drive to give rise to that which is new.
That can also be something in the personality that has a restlessness, that has a...
But that's not what I'm not talking about any form of neurosis or psychosis.
Okay.
I'm talking about, because those moments when we are overwhelmed, when we are unselfconsciously manifesting our own creative capacities, are the moments when we express our greatest potential as individuals, right? And what do we experience then? Ecstasy and urgency. The creative impulse or the evolutionary impulse, or the experience of the Creator God in the human experience, is the experience of ecstasy and urgency. When God, as that energy and intelligence that initiated the creative process, took that leap from being to becoming, from formlessness to form, from nothing to something, he or she changed shape and quality. So remember, God, before the universe was created, right, was and is the experience of timeless, formless being, which is peace. But when he or she took that leap, decided to manifest him or herself in form, then the experience, the nature and the experience of our absolute nature is ecstatic urgency, which is the experience of the urge to create, the urge to give rise to that which is new. And so that the new enlightenment that I'm very excited about is really giving more precedence and more importance to the individual awakening within themselves to this evolutionary impulse, to this creative impulse, to this urge to give rise to that which is new, which is the Creator God, which is the experience, the conscious experience within oneself of the energy and intelligence that created the universe, manifesting in our inner human experience as the urge to give rise to that which is new.